It was the kind of rain that didn't fall in sheets, but in a slow, persistent mist soaking through your coat before you realized it. Matthew Gray pulled his collar up and glanced at the boarded-up facade in front of him. The old city library had been shut for over 30 years, its windows clouded with dust, the once-proud stone steps cracked and green with moss. Most people passed it without a second look, but tonight something about the place felt different. The iron gate gave way with a reluctant groan as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick and stale, holding that strange, sweet scent of forgotten paper. Shelves stood like silent sentinels in the shadows, some leaning, some bare, others still crowded with books whose spines were cracked and faded. Matthew had been here before, just once as a child, but memory was slippery. He couldn't recall the layout, only the feeling, the sense that this place held secrets the city had long stopped caring about. His flashlight beams swept over broken chairs and scattered pages, and somewhere deeper in the gloom, a hollow thud echoed like something shifting. He hesitated in the stillness, his own breathing sounded too loud. That's when he noticed a narrow gap between two tall shelves, the kind of space you'd only see if you were looking closely. And behind it, something that didn't belong. He stepped closer, the beam of his flashlight trembling just slightly in his hand. The shelves were old oak, heavy and warped with time, yet the gap between them seemed intentional, like someone had moved them apart just enough to slide through. Matthew wedged his shoulder into the space, feeling the rough wood scrape his jacket, and emerged into a narrow alcove he hadn't known existed. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, stirred by his arrival. Against the far wall sat a single chair, its legs uneven, a layer of cobwebs draped like a forgotten veil. But it was the object resting on the floor beside it that caught his breath, a book, large and bound in cracked leather, its edges curling with age. The cover bore no title, only a faint embossed crest that time had nearly erased. He crouched, brushing away decades of grit with the back of his hand. The leather was cold, the kind of cold that felt out of place in the stagnant air. Something about it demanded caution, yet curiosity had already won. As he lifted the book, a dry, papery whisper escaped from its pages, and for a moment he could swear he heard something else. A murmur, too faint to name, almost as if the library itself was exhaling. Matthew eased the book open, the hinges of its spine groaning in protest. The first page was brittle and yellowed, the ink faded but still legible in looping, meticulous handwriting. It wasn't a story, at least not in the usual sense. It read more like a diary, each entry marked with dates from the late 1800s. The name at the top of the first page stopped him, Eleanor Vance. He didn't know why it sounded familiar, only that it did, stirring some half-formed memory he couldn't place. He turned another page, careful not to tear the fragile paper. The entries spoke of strange events within the library, unreturned books that mysteriously reappeared on the shelves, whispers in the empty reading hall. Shadows that moved against the grain of light. Eleanor wrote as though she had been the library's keeper, but her words hinted at something more, as if she were guarding it from the outside world. A sudden creak jolted him somewhere in the distance, wood shifted, sharp and deliberate. He froze, listening, his pulse climbing. The sound came again, closer this time, like footsteps on warped floorboards. He snapped the book shut, the echo of it far too loud in the silence, and instinctively stepped back toward the narrow gap. Yet part of him didn't want to leave. The footsteps halted, leaving only the low hum of the building settling around him. Matthew's breath fogged faintly in the beam of his flashlight, though the air hadn't been cold before. He turned slowly, the book still clutched to his chest, and the shadows seemed to bend in strange ways, stretching, curling at the edges like ink in wah. From somewhere beyond the shelves, a voice called out, soft and uncertain, "Is someone there?" It was a woman's voice, but the sound felt wrong, like it had traveled too far, warped by the distance and the walls. He hesitated, unsure whether to answer, but his curiosity tugged him forward. He slipped through the gap again, scanning the aisle. No one. Only the rhythmic drip of water from a pipe above. He almost convinced himself it was just his mind playing tricks, until he noticed the faint outline on the dusty floor, footprints. Bare, small, and impossibly fresh, they trailed between the shelves leading deeper into the library's heart. Every instinct told him to leave. But something about the way the prints wove between the forgotten rows made it feel like an invitation. He tightened his grip on the book and followed. The footprints led him into a section of the library he didn't remember from his childhood visit. The shelves here leaned at odd angles, some nearly touching at the top, creating a narrow tunnel of books and shadow. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied, revealing titles in languages he couldn't recognize, spines carved with symbols that seemed to shift when he looked too long. At the end of the aisle stood a tall, arched doorway, its frame carved with the same faint crest he had seen on the book's cover. Beyond it, the darkness was thicker, almost tangible, as if it resisted the light. Matthew paused, listening. No voice this time, no footsteps, only the steady thump of his heartbeat. Still, the footprints continued, vanishing into the black he stepped through. The air changed instantly, cooler, sharper, carrying the faint scent of smoke and something floral, long faded. In the center of the room, on a low pedestal, lay another book, smaller but bound in the same cracked leather. Beside it, a candle flickered, though no one had been here to light it. Matthew's hand hovered over the second book. Somewhere deep inside, a thought whispered that picking it up would mean crossing a line he couldn't uncross. But the library, and whatever it was hiding, had already pulled him too far to turn back. His fingers brushed the leather, and the flame of the candle quivered as though stirred by an unseen breath. The smaller book was lighter than he expected, its cover worn smooth at the edges, as if it had been handled countless times. He opened it slowly, expecting more diary entries, but instead found page after page filled with names, each carefully written, each accompanied by a D. 8. The earliest stretched back more than 2 centuries. The latest was from only a few months ago. Halfway down the final page, his eyes froze. His own name stared back at him, written in the same delicate script. No date, just the space waiting to be filled. A shiver ran through him, sharp and electric, and for a moment he felt certain someone was standing just over his shoulder. He turned quickly, the beam of his flashlight slicing across the room, empty, yet the candle's flame bent sideways as if pushed by movement. Then came the voice again, closer now, almost beside him. "You shouldn't have opened it, Matthew." His chest tightened. The air seemed heavier, pressing in from all sides. He snapped the book shut and took a step back toward the archway, but the shadows beyond it no longer looked like shadows. They shifted, as if something in them was waiting. Matthew's pulse hammered in his ears as he backed toward the archway, every muscle urging him to run, yet his feet dragging as if wading through water. The shadows along the doorway writhed, curling inward, almost forming shapes, thin, human-like but not quite. The voice came again, softer now, almost coaxing. "There's still time to understand if you stay." He gripped the smaller book tighter, the rough leather biting into his palm. Part of him wanted to hurl it away, to leave it there with whatever was speaking. But the other part, the same restless curiosity that had led him through the gap in the shelves, kept him rooted. He forced himself to speak, his voice low and unsteady. "What is this place?" For a heartbeat there was only silence. Then faintly, as if from far above, came the sound of pages turning. The shadows shifted, revealing what looked like a staircase winding upward into darkness, though he was certain it hadn't been there before. The footprints, those small, bare marks in the dust, now pointed toward it. Matthew stood at the threshold, the library holding its breath around him. He knew crossing that line might mean never finding his way back. And yet, with each passing second, the pull to climb grew stronger, as if the answers he sought had been waiting for him all along. He placed one foot on the first step, the wood groaning under his weight, and felt a chill seep through the sole of his shoe. The staircase spiraled tightly, hugging the walls so closely that his shoulder brushed the cold stone as he climbed. The candlelight from below faded quickly, replaced by a faint, silvery glow from somewhere above. Each step seemed longer than the last, as if the distance between floors was stretching. His breathing echoed back at him, distorted, like it belonged to someone else. Halfway up, he noticed the small book in his hand felt heavier, the weight pulling on his arm. He glanced down, the leather seemed darker now, the embossed crest more defined as though it had been freshly pressed. At the top, the stairs opened into a circular room. The walls were lined with glass cases, each containing a single book. Some were impossibly ancient, their bindings crumbling, others pristine as if untouched. In the center stood a tall woman in a faded gray dress, her hair pinned in a style decades out of fashion. She didn't turn at first, but her voice carried clearly in the still air. "Eleanor Vance," she said, as if introducing herself, and then, with a small, knowing smile, "I've been waiting for you." Matthew's mouth went dry. The name from the diary, the guardian of the library, and now she was standing just a few feet away. Matthew hesitated, his fingers tightening around the smaller book. Eleanor turned slowly, her eyes an unsettling shade between gray and silver, reflecting the dim light of the room. There was no dust on her dress, no sign that she belonged to the crumbling building below. She looked unchanged, as if the decades mentioned in the diary had passed around her, not through her. "You've brought it back," she said softly, nodding toward the book in his hands. "Most never return once they take it." "But you," her gaze lingered on him as though studying something beneath the surface. "You're different." He swallowed, unsure what to say. "What is it? Why is my name in it?" Eleanor stepped closer, her presence both calm and unnervingly heavy. "It's a record," she explained. "Of those the library chooses. Your name means you're bound to it now, unless you leave before it's written in full." Her voice lowered, almost a whisper, but leaving comes with its own price. Matthew's thoughts swirled, footprints, whispers, shifting shadows. The staircase behind him now seemed impossibly far away. Eleanor's eyes didn't leave his. "So," she asked, her tone gentle but edged with something sharp, "do you want to know why it chose you?" He didn't answer, not yet. But the pull in his chest told him he already knew he wouldn't walk away. Eleanor moved toward one of the glass cases, her fingertips gliding over the surface without leaving a mark. Inside lay a book larger than any Matthew had seen, its cover deep green and clasped shut with tarnished brass. "Every soul who enters this place leaves something behind," she said. "Some leave their stories willingly, others have them taken." She stopped before a case at the far end of the room and tapped the glass. Within it rested a thin, leather-bound journal, identical to the one in his hands, except this one bore a name he didn't recognize. "Daniel Hart," Matthew read aloud. Eleanor's voice softened. "He was the last chosen before you, he didn't stay." Matthew's grip on his own book tightened. What happened to him? Eleanor's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in her eyes like candlelight in a draft. "The library remembers him, but the world does not." The words sank into him with a weight that made his stomach twist. The choice was suddenly clear: stay, and uncover the truths buried here, or leave and risk losing himself entirely. Eleanor stepped closer again, her presence filling the space between them. "The shelves have been waiting," she murmured. "Shall we see where your story begins?" Matthew's heartbeat slowed, steadying into something that felt almost inevitable. He nodded. Eleanor's hand rested lightly on the glass of a nearby case, and the room seemed to breathe, dustless air shifting as if unseen pages were turning all around them. Matthew felt the weight of the smaller book in his hand settle, no longer heavy but certain. Somewhere deep in the library, a soft hum began, like hundreds of voices speaking just out of earshot. He glanced toward the staircase, now barely visible, the shadows swallowing it whole. That way led back to the rain, the cracked stone steps, the world he knew, but here was a place that remembered even when the world forgot. Slowly he stepped toward Eleanor, the sound of his own footfalls lost in the hush. As she reached for the book, her eyes held his, steady and unblinking. "Once we open it," she said, "your story belongs to the shelves." Matthew exhaled, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Then let's begin." The candlelight swelled, the hum deepened, and the last thing he saw before the glow consumed the room was Eleanor's slight, approving nod. If you want to uncover more forgotten places, more hidden truths buried in the shadows, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications, because Some doors once opened can never be closed.